Yes, my name is Tommy Welch. I'm the Chief Equity Officer for Gwinnett County Public Schools.
Also, it's great meeting you. I'm Bart, Glasgow. I'm an attorney here in the Metro Atlanta area.
Pleasure.
I'm Coley, Glasgow. I'm a dental hygienist, and I've been practicing dental hygiene for 30 years, and I work in Marietta.
Awesome. Pleasure meeting you.
Yeah. So you said, what was the role that you played? Chief Diversity Officer or
Chief Equity Officer.
Equity Officer?
Yes.
Awesome. So what do you do? What is that? You know, I'm not sure that I know fully what exactly that entails.
Yeah, so I sit on the senior leadership team that works hand in hand with the superintendent to make sure that teaching and learning is happening equitable across the entire district. When you talk about how the students are served, their learning environments. Remember, when we talk about student groups is a vast array of many things. So you have the student group of male, female. You have the student group of students with disabilities. You have student groups of ELL students. You have student groups disaggregated by their race. You have student groups that are based upon their socioeconomic status. All of these things come into play when you think about student groups. So when we look at those groups as a school system, we want to take a look at how are they performing? Do they have all the services that they need? So that's one aspect of my job, is to really provide that leadership group with that scope to ensure that we're providing our services at an equitable level and ensuring that everyone has what they need. Another aspect of that is there's also the compliance piece of it. Some of you may have heard of Title I dollars. It's federal funded dollars that are provided to schools based upon their socioeconomic status. Those things are really supplied to create equitable learning situations for the students. As based upon research, the federal government has deemed that these dollars are necessary to really offset some of those spaces that the students may need support. So that's another aspect. Some of you may have heard of Title IX. Title IX is a federal mandate as well. It talks a lot about how, well, in school setting, it talks about, which mainly plays with the sports and activities. And so we look at the gender equity that takes place there. So you want to make sure that there are enough activities for the men as well as there are for the females. So those are things that take place in Title IX. Also, you know, you have Title IX complaints that take place. Those are HR compliance issues. So I know I talked about a vast array of many things, and the list continues. But as you see, it goes from students to adults. And I think the most important part of my job is to really help the school district think strategically about how we can continue to address all of those concerns and maximizing student performance. That's the end goal. The end goal is to ensure that all students learn at a high level, no matter your zip code, where you come from, your race, your gender, your religion, your race, any of those student groups. It should not be predetermined by any one of those things. So that's the overall large goal.
Well, I mean, I know you got your hands full then, because that's a huge job. I mean, I could just, you've got so many parents and all different opinions and students that all, learn better in certain environments. I love the way that you said you work with students with disabilities and students, because that's one thing that Coley and I learned. We had participated in a event called Night to Shine, where it's for people who have disabilities. It's their prom, and so one thing that a lady at our church who handles our ministry to people with disabilities said is that they are not disabled people. They are people with disabilities. Yes. They are students with these. So I love the way you phrase that. Obviously this is a big job. So what drew you into it? What made you say, this is what I want to do? I mean, feel free to talk about your background or any of your passions that kind of said, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, I love teaching. I love helping people. I think that's what started my path to this journey of education, was just really want to help people. And then I love teaching. So when I started teaching, I noticed that there were disparities from school to school. And I saw that growing up, but I really didn't understand why. You don't understand certain things when you grow up, but you see them and you just kind of move along. But as I became older, I began to see that there were differences that took place. And my goal was never to be a chief equity officer. My goal was never to be a principal. My goal was, never to be a teacher or coach. I just wanted to help people. That was my goal. So I became a teacher, and through grad school started to read a lot and see that, wow, there's just a lot going on in education. And of course, we want to be the best. I think that's part of our goal in America, is to be the best at whatever we do. So we just always want to get better. So I thought that maybe I could help do that. So I knew that I always wanted to help and move forward education and ensure that I would be what I like to consider a great equalizer. And what I meant by that when I was teaching was I wanted to provide everyone an opportunity to learn at a high level. I have children now, and I remember the first day my child got that teacher assignment. I know how that felt of, did my child get the best teacher? I wanted my child to have the best teacher. So when I taught, what I mean by that great equalizers, I wanted to ensure that I was the best teacher, but I also empowered everyone around me to be the best teacher. When I became the principal, I wanted to do that as well. Regardless of what zip code they grew up in, what their family life was, what their religion was, their sexual orientation, none of that. I wanted just them to get the best education. And that's what propelled me to this role, because I was doing it anyway. Before Chief Equity Officer came around, I was making sure that all students had the best learning environment, no matter where you came from. So you asked what propelled me to this role, what intrigued me to take on this role is it's a passion. It's what I love to do. If it wasn't in education, I would be doing it in another form. Some things are just a calling, walk of life. I grew up learning to love everyone. No one made me do it. It was just kind of what was around me. So I didn't really know anything different. And I began to see that the world doesn't operate like that. It just doesn't. So a lot of what I lived, I just try to do onto everyone else and try to help others. Don't have to see it my way, but if I can help a child get a learning program, help a child get access to something that they did not, because of where they live, their classification, then I feel like I've done my part to help students get that quality education.
In Cherokee County Schools, there was this move to bring in someone who was basically like yourself, a diversity, equity, and inclusion person, and then a lot of parents had concerns about, is this teaching critical race theory, which actually I've come to learn a lot more about as an attorney, that it's actually a legal theory, and you're not really teaching critical race theory. It's a lens through which you look at laws and how laws create race and inequalities. So, and I'm thankful for that opportunity to be able to learn more, because none of us know what we don't know. I mean, we just don't. And so that's great. But I think some of the parents were concerned that it was a way to get in, and I think fundamentally it's this, what you said, giving kids an opportunity to learn at their highest level. And I don't know of any parents that are against that. I mean, absolutely not at all. I think what some saw it as is possibly one of the equity situations on the back end, where we try to make sure that everyone has the same outcome, regardless of effort, regardless of faculty, regardless of, and that's obviously, I'm a big sowing and reaping type person. I mean, you sow, you reap, but then some of these kids, they just don't have, I understand it, they just don't have a good field to sow into. Maybe they're hit with some impediments that other kids aren't. And so I think that was the major concern, is what would this DEI program look like? Is it a way to bring in, some of the more, I don't know, I hate the medium. I don't hate the medium. I'm thankful, okay? What I mean is that I hate that it seems like a lot of times the media covers the most polarizing positions on both sides and not just the middle ground.
Right.
So, you hear like the APS school who, the principal who decided it was a good idea to segregate fifth grade or whatever it was. And you think, what? How can this be? And then you get it tied to, it's a recognition of some kind of a critical race theory, the ability to allow the students to do better, and you think, in what world is that better to separate? We've been there, and we don't want to go back.
Yeah.
So I think that was our concerns, and just anything you can say to that would address that.
And those are valid concerns. I would say that's a major part of what a chief equity officer is responsible for answering those difficult questions about how will this be applied. In this space, when you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, a lot of things need to be cleared up. People have questions. If you've never heard those words before, then you need to know what do those words mean and how do they apply to public education. Someone has to facilitate that conversation. Also, some great points that you mentioned. You talk about equal outcomes. So how does that look if we talk about it in the space of equity and inclusion? So what type of outcomes are you looking for? What variables are you going to use to measure your performance? Those are fair questions. That is the job of the chief equity officer, to clarify those things, put metrics next to it, to be able to communicate it to the public, along with the superintendent, of how they are trying to create a more equitable school system. Let's think about this for a moment. In this space, race is the issue that everyone gets polarized about. But if you notice, when I talked about student groups, I mentioned that there are other student groups as well. So if we think about this, and I'm going to take race off the table for a moment and say, let's talk about students who are learning English for a second language. Let's talk about if they come into the system, the school system, whatever system that may be, do they have all the services and attention that they need and feeling of belonging within that school system so that they can maximize their potential? Is it present? Do they feel isolated, marginalized at any point in time within that school system? Do we have enough services and for the teachers so that they can understand where the students are coming from so they can better assist them? Is that present? Also, let's think about this. Could there also be a thought that if you don't speak English, maybe you can't learn at a high level? Could there be a thought that because you don't speak English as a primary language, that maybe you need to sit out and not take this test for gifted because you haven't mastered the English language yet? So these are things that impact students along the way. And without diversity, equity, and inclusion training, those things may go unnoticed. Because in the school district, and especially in a state like Georgia, where the population is changing and has changed over the years as it regards to diversity, if the same methods continue to be applied, we may see that our student achievement is going down. And it's not because the students aren't smart or they haven't learned. Maybe we need to apply what we're doing a little bit different for the students who are coming in. So I use that as an example of one, because I took race off the table for a moment to say, okay, now how does race play out in that sometimes? If you look at the different demographics of students, could that possibly be applied to students in the school district as well? Data should drive that conversation, not passion. Data that drives the conversation to say, let's look a little bit closer at why this may be something that is continuously happening over time. And is there anything that we can do? Not to blame, but is there anything that we can do that is within our locus of control to increase student achievement? And if there is, then let's see if we can do it. But also equity, the thought of equity is not just for those who don't have. Let's think about those who may need additional support. Think about students who come to school who, when they arrive in second grade, the teacher knows, wow, this student is way off the spectrum, right? They need more support. They need more enrichment. When you think about equity, I want you to think about the shoes that we wear. We all have different size feet. The shoes that we put on, we want to make sure that those shoes fit. If we gave everyone the same size shoe, one might be too tight, another one might be too big. But if we give everyone the shoe that fits, they can maximize their performance, whether they're walking or running. Think about that student who entered the second grade who was off the spectrum, who, if the services are not present at that school, meaning when I mean off the spectrum, they're reading and writing at an above grade level. They're asking a ton of questions every day because they're very inquisitive. That student also needs equitable services. Who's making sure that that student has what they need so that they can reach their maximum potential? Are they being told that you're in second grade, this is the curriculum, you have to stay right here. This is all we have to offer you. Or is someone paying attention and saying, look at this student's IQ score, we need to offer more. What can we provide for the teachers and the students to ensure that this student maximizes their potential? So equity goes, it provides every student what they need at their appropriate time. And we all go through things in life where at different points in time, we need different things. And I'll leave this last scenario with you in the space of equity. I have 3 children. They're all very different. I swear I'm raising them all the same. At least I think I am. But they all need attention a little different. One of them needs a smile after every compliment. One of them needs a little smile after every adjustment in their attitude. The other one, just tell me what to do. And then the last one, I haven't figured her out yet. She's one, but she's really sassy. So, I'm going to have to work on her. But I know that as they grow up, they're going to need different things from me and my wife and my family. They're just, and how we apply it's going to look different. Doesn't mean we love any one of them any less or any more. But they're going to need different things from us. And that's equity. Sometimes you have to sit down and explain to your children sometimes when they get upset, why did you let their sibling do this and you didn't let me do that? Or why it seems like you're harder on this person than on me. And it's hard to explain sometimes, and you do have to explain it to them because they deserve an explanation. But that's very similar to the equity work. You apply for the students what they need at their appropriate times, and it can change over time based upon the student. So I thought I'd just share with you those 2 analogies to kind of explain it. But that's the job of the Chief Equity Officer. If there's no Chief Equity Officer, then you'll have the CFO trying to explain equity and inclusion. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it does not.
Right. Yeah, I like your analogy, especially the one on the shoes. I mean, because I think that's something that people can, because we walk around, most of us do, most of us are blessed to be able to walk. Right. And, and to see, you need shoes. I mean, if you give me a size 6 shoe, my walk and my gait's going to look awful funny. And if you give me too big a shoe, it's going to look awful funny. So just to carry that analogy further, so would you say that, like, your job is to make sure the kid has the right size shoes, the right size program to let that child, to give that child the opportunity to go to their highest level, whatever they want to put into it, okay? Because we also know that sometimes kids don't put everything they have into it. Correct. So, but I like the analogy, and just to carry just one step further, looking at it as a 100-yard dash, you give the kid the best pair of shoes for the child, but it's still a 100-yard dash. You're still going to start on this line, and it's still the first one to cross 100 yards from now. We're not going to start somebody at 30 yards and somebody at 20 yards. Yes. So would you agree with that analogy, that it's your job to give them the right pair of shoes? It's up to them how fast they're going to run, how much they're going to put into it, and it's going to be the same metric as far as, crossing that 100-yard line.
Correct. Expectations still have to be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to have the high expectations, and some school districts will call that equity with excellence, meaning that they don't want to lower their bar of expectation. They want to ensure that they provide the support. for the students to get to that level of excellence. When I was a principal, we called that rigor with nurture. So we said we didn't want to reduce the rigor of the curriculum that we were teaching. We wanted to ensure that every student was taught at a high level. But we wanted to make sure that we provided the appropriate nurture to help them get to that point. And some students need more nurture, some students need less, but we wanted to make sure that we had a balanced approach. I think in business they talk about accountability and support, right? Those things have to be balanced. You can't hold people accountable without providing the support that's needed so that it can be held accountable. So you're exactly right. That 100-yard dash, you still need to run that 100-yard dash, and the times will still be there, and you're still competing with someone that needed a size 5 or size 10 or size 12. The world market is still there.
Right.
So, you know, I definitely agree. Yes, that 100-yard dash is definitely there. Never lower expectations, but you know, sometimes, and that's part of the equity work. I mean, it's part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work is to help people understand that, you know, equity and diversity is not lowering the standards.
Right.
And there is sometimes the thought that, you know, John or Sue had a rough time, so we're gonna lower the standards. Well, true diversity, equity, and inclusion work would say, no, we're not gonna lower the standards. We can provide more support. But we're not going to lower the standards because they do understand that Johnny or Sue is going to go out into this world and be held to the same expectations of everyone else. So you have to equip the student with the skills to be able to do that. It comes in a majority of different ways. It's not just academic skills. You have to teach them, you know, if they're having social emotional issues, you have to help them with how to deal with that. Some students, you know, they don't get that sense of belonging from home. So when they come to school, that's their only team that they know.
Right.
That's the only team they know. That's the only level of support they get. So we have to help the teachers how to do that, in the best way that's the most productive for the students so that they can learn the skill and continue that skill on their own as they continue to grow as an adult. A lot of things happen with kids as they grow through school, you know. Some of them go through different thought patterns about themselves and how, you know, the outside world may view them. Students go through different changes in their life, you know. Let's think about elementary school. When my daughter first went to elementary school, I think that was the first time she realized that people may see her a little different than she saw herself. So they need help understanding that. But also sometimes students need help understanding that, okay, what you said hurts someone else's feelings. So how do you rephrase that? How do you express yourself? Those are things that kids learn. They learn those things in school. We try to teach those things at home, but they learn some of those things in school as well. Let's fast forward to middle school. Students' bodies are changing. I mean, if you ever heard a middle school student, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Their bodies are changing. They're frustrated that their bodies are changing. They don't know why these things are happening to them. They're grappling with the world and their sexuality. All these things that at school, we believe it. We are like, hey, we just teach. But they're bringing these things into the building. The walls of the school are porous. Everything that's happening in society ends up in the school. So we have to teach the teachers how to balance those, where to redirect that energy, where to ensure that the students feel supported and they have a place to belong as they're going through all of those things, and we're trying to maximize their student potential. And then you get to high school. The same things are happening, and they're thinking about what's going to happen when I graduate. The stress of, will I be able to make my parents proud? If my parents are here, will I be able to make them proud? Do I have the resources to continue on the next level? Do I want to go on the next level? Do I want to go to college? You know, will I have enough money to take care of myself? All of these thoughts that go through high schoolers' minds as they continue to matriculate through the curriculum. Those are the other things that teachers try to help students with as much as they can. Because sometimes, as I said, the only team they have is at school. So these conversations that I have with my children, I can't assume that everyone is having them with their children. So sometimes the adults in the building are the ones who become a part of that team. I think my mother relied a lot on the school system because she worked all the time. So they raised me.
Yeah, my sister's a lifelong teacher. Not in this state, but anyway, I'd hear the stories. I'd hear the parent-teacher conferences and how they've evolved over the years. I know that when my parents went to a parent-teacher conference, all the teacher had to say was, I'm having a little difficulty, getting him on task. That was all. I mean, there was no argument. There was no, well, what have you done to try to get my son on task? It was, we'll take care of it. He'll pay attention. If he doesn't, just let us know. And so we definitely had, the teachers had the parental support, my parents' support, fully. But, I think one of the things that did concern, I know people in Cherokee County, was they started to talk about this, what you brought up, social emotional learning. And I can understand, I cannot imagine being a teacher, seeing children struggle with emotional issues and feeling like, well, I'm not the parent, but I don't think the parents are involved, or maybe they don't know, or whatever it is, but yet there's this problem. And in one side, I can see that a teacher's like, how much more do you want me to do? I'm teaching. And I'm talking about maybe some challenges that you have in doing your job, but I'm teaching. I'm trying to make this material fresh and exciting, and I want these kids to learn, but now I'm also supposed to kind of help with their social emotional development. And I think some parents, especially the very involved parents, feel like, is the government, because it's a public school system,
Correct.
Is the government becoming my third parent? I've looked at some of the things like in Cherokee County that they teach under what they would call social emotional learning. I think it's a seven positive mindsets and things. Not anything that I necessarily would disagree with, But like you said, there's that parental involvement, and then the parents that are involved and they send their kids to school for education, but then maybe they're getting, not on every message, but on some messages, conflicting messages. School says this, mom and dad says this. That has got to be a challenge. I'm sure that you encounter, challenges with. Well, maybe this is the best question. What would be the biggest challenges you face with teachers in doing your job, and what are the biggest challenges you face with parents?
The great thing about public education system is we're partners. What I mean, we're partners. The parents and the school system are partners in providing a quality education. So we rely on the parents to support the curriculum at home, meaning as they learn it in school, to send home homework and things of that sort, to be involved in the learning process. Most school districts, they provide parents the opportunity to help in selecting materials and things of that sort. That partnership is strong. That partnership also extends to a part of your question of, what do you do when Johnny is learning something different at home and they're learning at school? It takes place the same time in curriculum as it does in the space of SEL. Mommy taught me how to do this math problem this way. The teacher's doing it wrong. It happens all the time, not just in social emotional learning. Social emotional learning has been around for a long time. This is not a new topic. It's been part of the National Association for Counselors for years on how they apply support for their students. It's not new. I don't know when you all went to school what time frame,
Long time ago.
You might have had something called homeroom or advisement.
We had homeroom.
Right? So homeroom was used as a time to connect with an adult. Some adults used it different than others, right? Sometimes you just sat there, sometimes, you talked about different things with the teacher, but it was a connection piece. And a lot of people believe that because American education has become so data-driven, that connection with the people in the building is being lost. because that time of homeroom or advisement, which we used to call it, has been reduced because we want them to focus more on the outcomes of academic performance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, research has also shown that depression among students and anxiety is skyrocketing because we've reduced that time and the focus on the student as a whole. So that's why you hear more now about SEL.
Mm-hmm.
You hear more now about SEL because of when we went to the online learning platform, you saw a lot of students grappling with that aspect of they knew that learning was social, they craved that environment, but they didn't have anyone to talk to about
Mm-hmm.
it. And the parents, as a parent, we love our children, we do the best for our children,
Mm-hmm.
but there are always some things that they tell other people that they won't talk to us about. It drives me crazy with my children, but I accept that sometimes they may feel more comfortable telling someone else. And that's where the teacher gets put into the bad spot, or the counselor gets put into the bad spot. Because Johnny or Sue decided to have that conversation with their favorite teacher or their favorite coach or in class because they felt like that was a safe place. But that provides the parent an opportunity to at least know what's going on with their child and in their life. And sometimes those conversations are hard to have with the adults or the parents. And that's where the training of SEL comes in place.
Mm-hmm.
We've created a safe place for your child to have these conversations. Now we're telling you what's going on with the child.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you, but here's the services we have at the school. If you'd like to take advantage of those, we call those an RTI process. There's 3 levels of how you support individuals. We let you know what's available that we do for all students. If they're a harm to themselves or others, then we escalate it. But if they're not a harm to themselves or others, typically the parents deal with it. I think the hardest part of my job with the parents is just really, I'm not an advocate. I advocate for children and for students. And people expect me to take a position on either side. As a chief equity officer, I don't think I can really enter into every conversation with an open mind if I already have continuously voiced my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So in this space as a chief equity officer, I make sure that my opinions, my personal biases are checked always at the door so that I can be open to everyone's perspective. Because as a chief equity officer, I need to be able to communicate, hear, teach everyone without having any ulterior motives.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be frustrating sometimes to parents because they want me to pick a side. And I can't do that.
Yeah.
Because today it might be a student who's upset because someone has called them a name because of a certain pronoun they want to use. Tomorrow it could be a student who's upset because the student wanted to use a pronoun.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to be able to communicate and talk to both students and help them understand how to get along in a learning space, but also to learn from each other and to maximize their actual potential while they're in that building together. The same thing with adults. So the same problem I have with parents, the same problem I have with adults.
Mm-hmm.
They want me to pick a side.
Mm-hmm.
Say, how can I truly be fully inclusive if I'm excluding people? I can't do that. So I have to listen to everyone, but I also want to ensure that I'm cordial with everyone, give everyone an opportunity to speak and bring the people together. That is my true goal in the Chief Equity and Inclusion Office, is to bring people together so that the system of education can function at its highest level for all students, not just your student and your student isolated, but all of our students, because they all go in the building together. And for some people that's hard to grasp, because when you have a child, that is your child. And I understand that when you enter that conversation, your lens is for your child, but they go to school with a lot of other children. So how can we ensure that everyone gets what they need, the shoe that they need that fits their foot, so that they can maximize their potential and receive a quality education. For some, that's hard to grasp, and I understand, because I have children too. When I take off my Chief Equity Officer hat and I go into a principal's office, guess what I'm concerned about? My child.
That's right.
And I understand that. They're advocating for their child, and I'm advocating for all children. So that's the hardest part of my job. It keeps me up at night, but I find ways to stay balanced.
Well, good. Yeah, that's the, so you really wouldn't see the school's job. I mean, for some parents who say, I don't want to parent, my child with the school, because that's usually what you hear from the people who are against the social emotional learning. And I get it. Sometimes it's just a lack of knowledge. It's a lack of what is social emotional learning, what is diversity, equity, inclusion, what does it mean that my child will be exposed to, what does it mean that my child will be required to do. Right. But I don't hear you saying that it's not about what your child will be required to do or exposed to. It's more of giving every child the ability to run in the proper pair of shoes, so to speak, and to be respectful, obviously, of everyone. I mean, that is something that I think that the school even should, obviously enforce, that children are respectful of one another. But you would not, then if a parent says, I don't want to raise my child on how they should emotionally process things, or how they should, I don't want to do that with the school. I want my child to listen to me for those things, go to school and learn, and then the parents or the teachers, if they're having an issue, or they see an issue, or the child comes to them, it comes to a teacher, their favorite teacher, like you said, I want them to come to me and talk to me about it, and then I'll decide for my child how we need to go, where we need to go from here. And I think you said 3 levels, R, T, and I. I don't know what those mean, but R, T, and I. Would that be kind of would that be your position? You're not there to raise their children with them. You're not there to introduce something that may be contradictory. You're there to make sure that everyone respects everyone and that everybody has the best opportunity to learn.
It's hard to say that the school and the parents don't raise their children together. And the reason why I say that is because they spend a lot of time in the school, and they do. So I think when we select schools for our students, we pay attention to the culture. We pay attention to this. We pay attention to those things because we want our children to be in an environment that's safe for them. I think that's what all parents, they pay attention to those things. So to say that it's not a relationship that is a co-parenting, I think I might be dishonest in saying that they both do them in isolation. Because when a child's in a classroom, in a class for 6 hours out of the day, and if they're in extracurricular activities, 8 hours out of the day, there are a lot of things that they're picking up. A lot of things. So the child is digesting a lot of information. So in turn, you're a lawyer, the locus parentis, right? That is real. That's real.
Right.
So I think that the communication between the two and how that happens is very important. So this conversation that we talked about of when do you inform the parent and when can the parent say no, this happens all the time. I don't want my child to read this book. Don't want my child to sit through this class. Don't want my child to take this test. All of these things, the parent does have the right, if they wanted to exclude their child from it. The thought would be, from an educator's standpoint, is, are they going to be tested on this? Is this something that's going to prevent them from learning further? And those things come into play. So as a parent, you could always go in and say, talk to the principal or the counselor, either one, learn a little bit more about what's going on. But if that's not something that is for your child, or you're not comfortable with it, that's the engagement, that's the partnership. And those things happen all the time. They do. You know, some things in certain religions they don't do, and they ask that the school remove their child from certain environments when those things are taking place. These conversations are not abnormal, and we have mechanisms in our school systems to help us facilitate that conversation. So I would definitely say it's a partnership. And when I say a partnership, it's a community is community. Good communities make great schools, right? So a school is a reflection of its community, always. I mean, you can go into any school, and especially elementary schools, I can tell you that it's a feel of the community. So it's a give and take relationship, it's a communication, it's a strong partnership. So I think that listening to each other, finding common ground is important. But I would definitely say that I wouldn't do them in isolation. I think it'd be hard for the student. You know, it'd be very hard for the student.
Yeah, I like the word partnership. I think that really more defines it than being a third parent. I mean, I think that obviously our kids, whether they go to public school, private school, there's a partnership with the educators because the kid is in school for hours a day. And a lot of times those learning, those events where they socially learn or they learn a lesson on society, you know, not one that the teacher's teaching, but they've learned it. I think that's great. I think I understand that part of it. But I also like what you said, that, you know, the parent's brought in and the parent can then say, well, you know, I don't want my child to attend this or read this book, or, you know, we have problems with this. And that, I guess, was my what I was asking. The parent is still in control of being able to say, for, you know, religious reasons or for, you know, our you know, beliefs, we don't want our child reading this book or taking this test. And then you would, you know, so the parent would have that control over their child, at least. And I mean, I agree with that. I say partnership, not so much a third parent. So,
right?
Is that basically what you were saying?
Yes, and those things happen. Those things happen, and they happen often.
Right.
You know, I think so. In this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of the major things that we get, and part of the reason why I think in that conversation when people talk about indoctrination and things of that sort, when they talk about the books that the students are reading, you know, we heard from a lot of students and parents that some of the books that they were reading did not reflect who they were. So sometimes the books may have been offensive to them. So to provide more selection and opportunity for the students to choose, a lot of schools across the nation begin to seek out authors of different races and genders, religions, so that they can see themselves in their text. That came about because some people would say, you know, this book is not really inspiring my child. Do you have another option? And there were no options. So the options became available. So, you know, I give that example because I hear it still both ways, and the goal is to provide options so that everyone has a sense of belonging in the school, not to exclude, to include more, not to exclude.
Okay. So, and I brought this up at our school board meeting. My concern, like I said, is the same, I think, as yours, and that is to give kids the opportunity to learn. And I tell you, one of the things that breaks my heart, and, you know, we have not been able, we have had, we've been able to live in great school districts, you know, as my kids are going through school and have gone through school. And to me, it's those school districts that are failing school districts. They're failing for whatever reason. I've gone in and actually even pulled, you know, financial numbers from the Department of Education, you know, for one school, more urban school system versus, say, Cherokee. How much money is being paid per student to educate the child as a portion of their total budget and as a portion of their instructional budget? And I've come away with the understanding that funding doesn't make the difference.
Right.
I mean, even the urban district actually is spending a little bit more money per person on instructional budget and total budget. And I'm just, and so I brought up the issue of school vouchers, not for just every parent to just be able to use, their kids in a superb school district. But for parents who are in school districts where they have no choice, they have their kids, all shoes are size 4 and fit hardly anyone. Yeah. We grew up on farms, and so I kind of look at everything in farming in farming lingo. But it's like we're all born with different faculties and different capacities for different things. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's whiz at science. I'm terrible. I would rather take a long essay exam where I can explain my answers and fill out all the. She would not. She wants to know, is it A, B, C, or D? Mm-hmm. All of us are different, and all of us have got different, and we also have different work ethics. Some of us want to work hard, and some people don't. I mean, it's just the truth. And some of us have got, born with sharp plows. We don't have to work as hard to get those A's. Mm-hmm. Some are born with duller plows. They have to work twice as hard to get those A's. But the one thing that really, to me, is that we all have different fields, and some fields are very hard and rocky. And those are those failing school districts where it's like, I don't know the solution, but I know that parents should have a choice to take those educational dollars and if there is another option that opens up, like a charter school, to at least give those parents a choice. How do you feel about something like that, where kids, they're not allowed to have that opportunity?
Yeah. I think, every urban environment is completely different in the landscape that they have. But I think it's important in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion to acknowledge that just what you said is that it didn't just happen. Mm-hmm. Right? You called them failing school districts. You mentioned that for some reason the school district or the school has continuously been in this space of underachieving for over 10, 15 years. Doesn't matter what group of students came through, for some reason it hasn't taken off. And this is where the space of the work of a chief equity officer really begins to take place. When you talk about improving schools, especially those schools who have traditionally underperformed. And when I mean underperformed, I mean that they're not reaching the performance mark in which we have expected the students to reach. How do you innovate in those spaces to create options for students and parents? Mm-hmm. How do you ensure that they're being taught at the highest level possible? Do you have metrics to monitor that, to ensure that that pattern does not continuously happen? That is the true essence and work when it comes down to student achievement of a chief equity officer, is to ensure that those things no longer take place. And you can't be changed with all the things we've tried in the past of change the principal, change the name of the school, build a new school. Those things we know we have tried, but yet the cycle still continues. And you can go back 20 years, we still see the same cycle. So as a chief equity officer, the job is to say, okay, what's going on in this space? Is it a little bit deeper than money? Is it a little bit deeper than the zip code? What is going on in this space? Is it hard to retain teachers in this space? Why is it hard to retain teachers? What is inequitable about this situation that's taking place? What's going on? Is it pay? Is it hours that's worked? Are the teachers stressed out? What's going on in these spaces to ensure that we can create an equitable education? I talk a lot about educational equity, and it means that we focus on the thing that we can control, and that's education. So how do you provide more options? Of course you want to provide more options. I don't want to get into the charter debate or the voucher debate, but as a public school, how do you create those options within your locus of control if you don't want vouchers? Right? So as a chief equity officer, I think it's important to see how do you create those options? Where does the innovation take place? How are you meeting the needs of every student in that school? And you mentioned that there are some students in that school that may need additional academic services because they're gifted, but in that environment, they can't get it.
Right.
In that environment, they can't get the advanced placement classes that they need. So what is the chief equity officer doing to make sure that that quality of education is happening even in those schools so that the tradition of low performance does not happen? That is a job and a calling of the chief equity officer. It's a large part of school improvement. If a chief equity officer is not focusing on that bottom line, something's wrong. Something's wrong. But that is a large part. And that's why you see them a lot in the urban settings, is because you see that in these traditionally low performing areas, there's a lot more that needs to be done than just in the school. Talk about the economic development and bringing into the community and working on the family aspect in each one of those areas. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. The chief equity officer has to figure out how do we reach each and every community to ensure that that takes place. It's hard work. It's you know, there's multiple variables and layers that are applied to that, but it's the chief equity officer's job to find out what is it that that community needs. And it can't be applied to the next community because the next community can be totally different.
Right.
You guys have been talking about just painting a picture of, you know, assessing the kids, figuring out the right size shoe to give them to maximize the education. But I read an article in February that they were talking about, I think in 5 different counties, there was a high population of students that were just, disruptive, contributing to, discipline, needing discipline to kind of get, under control. And what do you guys do with students that are like, I don't want your shoes. I'm just not interested, or I have other plans in my agenda and it is not learning here. I'm not putting the shoes on. What do you guys do with that?
We call that student engagement. So
I like that term.
So some students are not engaged. Some families are not engaged. So they don't want the shoe. So you have to work on trying to engage them, finding out ways of bringing them back into the school, and then working on the academic piece. And then if the schoolhouse is not the best setting for them, what other options do you have? Because you just can't put them on the street because then crime goes up. So what are you going to do? So they're still people. They're still our students. They're still our students. So we have to provide an opportunity for them to be engaged somewhere. A lot of students, sometimes it's not that they don't want to be engaged. They don't feel like they belong in certain settings. So they don't want to go to the school because they don't feel like they have a team there. Some students. Then there are some students that they want to do something else. And sometimes it's not that they want to be bad, it's that they just don't want to do what we're offering. So if we can find out what their interests are, we can help them. There's been over the last 4 years, there's been a strong push towards CTAE, which stands for Career, Technology, Agricultural Education, right? Yeah. Because students are seeing online and they're reading that going to college isn't the only option to make money. That I can get a skill now and get paid a ton of money when I turn 18 or 17, or I can do some things online and make a ton of money. So what is this education thing about? Because I thought we only went to school to make money. So they have other options, so we have to change the curriculum. We have to work on things to bring them back into school. School, I always say there's push and pull factors. There are things in a school that can push a student out, but there's also things in a school that can pull them in. And that student engagement piece are the things that you need to capture their attention and bring them back into that safe culture. So we do have to work on those things to engage every student. And then make sure that they have a place where they belong. Some students don't want to go to school for 8 hours. It's just not their thing. They don't wake up in the morning. They want to do it online. Does your school district provide that option? Some students, they don't want all the other activities. They just want to go to school, get their basics, and go work. Does your school district offer an option for that? Our school district does. We're lucky we're large. We have those options available for our students. But I think it's important if you're a chief equity officer, you got to find that shoe. You got to find out how to engage the students. And even if it means that, you know, you might have to do something a little different than it's ever been done, that everyone else needs, if those students need it, you could save a life.
Mm-hmm. And also in the article, it was saying, and in this particular one, that of the disciplinaries in school, it was a really high percentage of the black students. And they were interviewing this gentleman, and he said that I was always known as the bad kid. And he said, I just felt like the white teachers I had never understood me. So do you encounter situations like that? And as a chief equity officer, are there roles that can be done to help that student and the teacher connect? And because I think a lot of it depends on a relationship, and he felt like he could not connect.
Yeah. You know, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, CRT, and I've read in the media they call their little cousins. So you hear like SEL and culturally responsive teaching and things like that. They say they're the little cousins of CRT. And those things are to do exactly what you stated. We're trying to equip the teacher with skills and resources, how to relate to students, all students, particularly students who don't look like you or come from a background that you're familiar with. So things like responsive teaching teaches you how to respond to every student, no matter where they come from, to make that connection. Now, we're older, so we probably think that's normal. Isn't that's all building a connection with someone and get to know them? Well, everyone doesn't have that skill. If you've never grown up with someone that's different, you may not know anything about their culture at all. So you may not understand what may be going on in their life or things that they may be experiencing. So how do you break the ice to begin to have those conversations? So those things like responsive teaching and SEL help create an environment of belonging where students feel more comfortable being their authentic selves, so that they feel like the teacher cares about them and, you know, it has skills. But these things just didn't happen. Teachers asked for them because they said, I'm in a classroom. No, let's take it back to demographics. The demographics of student population has changed dramatically over the years to where the majority of the students are coming from very diverse backgrounds, not just race, but all different types of backgrounds. But the teachers come from a more similar background because we go through an academic channel. Think about it. Mm-hmm. You know, to be a teacher, you have to graduate from high school, go to college, right? And then most teachers get their master's degree. Mm-hmm. So it's a certain type of person. So if another student comes from a totally different environment that I'm unfamiliar with, and I just came out of college, the likelihood of me being exposed to a majority of those things could be unlikely, depending on where I went to school. So they've asked for those skills. I'm teaching students who come from different walks of life, and I was taught in college that I need to build that connection because research says that a student is going to learn from you when they know that you care and you love for them. But I'm having a hard time of making this connection. Can you teach me how to make this connection? Because I don't know how to connect with John. You know, I'm trying to, but I don't. You know, so those are the things that they've gone through. And I personally experienced that as well. So I understood and still understand exactly what they're talking about. I'm a black male, but I led a school that transitioned from a majority African American school very quickly to a majority Latinx and Hispanic school. And I tried to apply the same things that I did when it was majority African American. It didn't work. Mm-hmm. I found out that I walked through the hall, kids would look at me like, I'm like, why don't you, I'm your principal, I love you, I care for you. No, it didn't show. I had to make that connection. So I learned very quickly that I had to adapt with the culture and learn more about them and learn more about their families and be in the community, and it became authentic. And then out of the blue, the culture changed. The parents flooded the school. They felt more open, more sense of belonging. I won Principal of the Year for the state of Georgia, and became a national finalist for Principal of the Year because of that. But I had to learn how to do that, and I'll be honest, it was uncomfortable at times because I didn't know how to operate in that space, and I had to learn things that wasn't a part of who I was, but I did it because it was a part of who my students were. And in order for them to feel more comfortable and learn from me and the teachers that I led, I had to take that step, being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're referring to, but that's what those things are to help. And that's that training. When I hear the concern about certain trainings that are happening, well, there's skills to help the teacher, not the student, to help the teacher help the students.
Yeah.
Not for the kids, but it helps the kids because the teacher understands a little bit better where the student's coming from. And that's what it's about. So.
Well, I wanted to share with you, I went to Tennessee State University and Meharry Medical College for dental hygiene.
Oh, okay.
And that was a wonderful, treasured experience for me because I grew up in a predominantly, in a rural area, a white area, and going to the HBCU, it felt weird at first, the first couple of weeks. But then as I felt embraced and loved by the faculty and staff and the students, I felt this is my family. And I went to school there about 2 years, and there were 2 occasions there where other students walked up to us and said, "You don't belong here." But I just, I don't focus on that because in every family there's drama, right?
Yes.
So I just focus on the acceptance and the love that I had from the teachers and the faculty and the student body. I was part of the family and I loved it, and it really gave me an appreciation for other people, and it was a great experience for me.
You helped do fundraising for the Alumni Association
yeah.
too.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I did that.
Yeah, we are. I think a lot of times where the issues come and where what you're talking about can help by being vulnerable is because people think that, like, say, oh, well, you live in Cherokee County, you're conservative, so this is how you think about things, and then people there may say, well, you live in a more urban area, this is how you think about things, and it's like, no. I think in our core, we all really want the same thing.
Yes, we do.
When we do mission work, and we were going through some mission training about a decade ago, it was amazing. You look at other cultures and you see weird things that they did, but then you look at what is the motivation for that behavior. Well, the motivation for that behavior is because they want their kids healthy, or they want health in their home. So it's not different. It's different in the way you see it.
Yes.
But the common beliefs that we all share. We want, safe schools. We want healthy kids. We want them to have the opportunities to be able to flourish. Whether they do or not is their choice.
That's right.
But we want to. So I think that that's some of the things that we learn. So we don't like to be pigeonholed or stereotyped because it's just not who we are. We want to be vulnerable, and that's the reason we're doing this. Is because hopefully it flips the narrative, changes things around where it doesn't get seems so divisive in the dialogue. Well, there really is no dialogue. It's more divisive. So I really appreciate you coming and answering questions.
I really thank you all for doing this, because if people could see us sitting down, and it's okay to disagree.
Yeah.
But what's not okay is that we refuse to communicate civilly with each other and have a conversation, and that's all it's about. So if we can model that for the kids, then they'll that's one more thing that they'll have learned, that it's okay to disagree, it's okay to come from different perspectives, but just talk about it.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Let's just talk about it and try to do what's best for whatever our end goal is.
That's right.